The summer of 2026 was a highly consequential period for the artificial intelligence sector, and OpenAI was right at the center of some rapid, major operational changes. We saw the rollout of the GPT-5.6 model family, some highly unusual government engagements, massive platform consolidations, and reported preparations for an initial public offering. But independent analysis of all these actions raises one central question. Do these moves actually represent a cohesive, durable strategic master plan? Or are we simply looking at a series of tactical, isolated responses to some very real regulatory and financial pressures? Well, in this explainer, we're going to objectively evaluate the evidence.
We'll be looking at 6 key areas: the GPT 5.6 rollout, voluntary federal engagement, platform and infrastructure shifts, operating costs and economics, IPO preparation and uncertainty, and finally, evaluating the strategic trajectory. So, our core analytical objective here is figuring out whether OpenAI's governance, product, and infrastructure maneuvers represent a durable strategic realignment or just isolated temporary reactions to being caught in a regulatory and financial crossfire. Let's start with Section 1, the GPT 5.6 rollout and its staggered launch sequence.
Here's how things unfolded. On June 2nd, Executive Order 1449 established a framework for frontier model review. Just 10 days later, rival developer Anthropic faced a severe model suspension. Then, on June 26, OpenAI initiated a limited preview of GPT 5.6. This included their flagship Sol model, the balanced Terra model, and the budget Luna model, but it was restricted strictly to trusted partners and the U.S. government. The public release didn't happen until July 9th. Now, while this chronology provides some really essential context, it's absolutely critical to remember that sequence alone does not establish causation.
Moving to Section 2, voluntary federal engagement. Let's clarify the regulatory framework here. It is incredibly important to distinguish what the government actually requested. Executive Order 14409 directed agencies to design a voluntary pre-release engagement framework, basically allowing developers to grant access for up to 30 days. It explicitly did not authorize mandatory governmental licensing, permitting, or pre-clearance to block models. So to be clear, the U.S. government did not legally block the GPT 5.6 release. OpenAI participated entirely voluntarily.
And OpenAI officially framed this compliance as a short-term step, definitely not a permanent strategic pivot. In fact, the company explicitly stated they do not believe this kind of government access process should become the long-term default. They characterized it strictly as a tactical accommodation.
But we have to look at the highly specific regulatory environment where this voluntary action occurred. Just weeks prior, the Commerce Department used export administration regulations to force a global emergency suspension of rival Anthropic's Fable 5 and Mythos 5 models, citing alleged cybersecurity vulnerabilities. Now, no public evidence proves this incident caused OpenAI's voluntary submission. However, legal analysts do view that severe, unilateral action against Anthropic as a very powerful catalyst for preemptive, voluntary compliance. Section 3. Platform and infrastructure shifts. The move to a workspace environment. Right around the same time as the model launch, OpenAI kicked off a major architectural overhaul. They launched the ChatGPT Work agentic platform, introduced ChatGPT Sites for interactive web apps, integrated the Codex programming environment, and actually scheduled the Atlas browser for deprecation. Analysts have characterized this as a sort of super app strategy designed to capture highly lucrative recurring enterprise revenue by effectively monopolizing user workflows.
Interestingly, though, independent reporting from Spyglass suggests that the unified desktop interface they launched in early July ended up being far too rigid, essentially burying traditional chat functionality. As a result, by July 17th, OpenAI reportedly issued a rapid rollback. They restored the standard message interface as the primary default and moved that new work environment over to a secondary tab.
Section 4. Operating costs and economics, and understanding the financial pressures behind these moves. That drive for a unified enterprise super app is directly tied to the company's incredibly challenging unit economics. Independent analysis of leaked 2025 financial documents shows OpenAI generating over $13 billion in revenue against a massive $34 billion in costs. This resulted in a reported operating loss of $20.92 billion for core operations. Now, it's really important to distinctly separate that number from the reported net loss of $38.53 billion, because that net loss is heavily skewed by a $41.55 billion non-cash accounting charge tied to corporate restructuring.
And a huge portion of those operating expenses is tied straight to infrastructure. During 2025, OpenAI reportedly paid Microsoft $17.2 billion, which just underscores an intense dependence on a single infrastructure partner for model compute.
So to alter this brutal cost structure, the company executed some major structural maneuvers. In April 2026, they restructured the Microsoft partnership to make the IP license non-exclusive, meaning OpenAI can now deploy on competing cloud providers like AWS. Then in June, OpenAI and Broadcom unveiled Jalapeño, a custom ASIC designed specifically for LLM inference. Though we should note that performance claims for the silicon are currently based entirely on early lab testing, not verified production-scale results.
Moving to Section 5, IPO preparation and uncertainty, and testing the public markets.
Market commentators widely view all these enterprise and silicon maneuvers as preparation for testing the public markets. But we have to keep a strict separation between confirmed facts and speculated claims here. The Guardian did report the submission of a confidential S1 draft via a company blog post. However, secondary reporting about a staggering $1 trillion valuation target and potential delays pushing the IPO to 2027 due to market volatility, those claims remain officially unconfirmed.
Capital efficiency metrics also give us some critical context for potential public market headwinds. Morningstar's PitchBook AI framework gives OpenAI a score of 4.53 out of 10 for efficient capital-to-revenue conversion. Compare that to rival Anthropic, which scores an 8.20. Analysts note this comparative baseline is exactly why retail investors might highly scrutinize those aggressive valuation targets.
Finally, Section 6. Evaluating the strategic trajectory by weighing the evidence. Based on current evidence, independent assessment supports three distinct interpretations. First, temporary accommodation, meaning OpenAI complied with government review simply as an expedient route to deployment. This carries strong evidentiary weight based on their stated intent. Second, financially driven consolidation, the idea that the super app and custom silicon are observable margin expansion actions for an IPO. This carries moderate weight. And third, durable governance alignment, the theory that OpenAI is permanently aligning with the state, which currently carries low evidentiary weight.
That theory of durable governance alignment relies heavily on some isolated reporting. There are unconfirmed conceptual talks outlining a proposal where leading U.S. AI developers would contribute a 5% equity stake to a government-managed vehicle. But neither OpenAI nor the White House has confirmed this, so until it's formalized, the idea of permanent state alignment remains strictly a bounded analytical inference.
Conclusion: what remains unknown.
To accurately forecast OpenAI's trajectory without falling into speculation, we really need to pivot to a precise watch list of future evidence. Here are the key indicators we're tracking: formal action on that 5% equity proposal, classified thresholds defining a covered frontier model, finalized IPO timing and valuation targets, verified production data for the Jalapeño chip, and crucially, whether this voluntary pre-release vetting actually becomes a recurring industry norm.
As those data points emerge, the ultimate question remains completely open. Is OpenAI building an enduring, state-aligned enterprise ecosystem, or are they just executing temporary survival tactics through a period of intense regulatory and financial crossfire, ready to shift their strategy once again the very moment public market pressures take hold?